Pleasant good day to everyone. You know, actually catch me by surprise because I hear the music, but at the same time, the conversation is so interesting in relation to the Dragon gas field and the announcement by the Prime Minister. But first, let me welcome each and every one of you as usual to the program. Thanks for tuning in. And of course, today we will be starting the program precise because the General himself, the MP for Mayaro, the man himself is sitting right here. And, you know, there are some persons in the party, to me, that do not really need an introduction to, because the work that this MP continue to do on a daily basis throughout the length and breadth in this country, and also on behalf of the party and you, the citizens, I think you people in Mayaro are supposed to be very, very proud of this gentleman, your MP. Going forward, of course, you will hear, as we was discussing a while ago, things that emanate out of the press conference this week by MP Paray and Dr. Tim Gopi Singh, and also the youth officer who was also on the program. So we will get into that. But first of all, I just want to speak a little bit, just a little bit on something that I was reading coming up the road. I am hearing that the TTPS is about to approach the courts to get an order to go to the cemetery, dig up a grave with an individual who was buried with a camouflage uniform. I don't know if you people understand why I just said it. They're going to get a court order to dig up a grave, to seize the uniform. I think that guy buried about 2 weeks now. They're about last week. They're going to get an order to go to the cemetery to dig up a grave, to take off a camouflage uniform off of a corpse, and the funeral home will have questions to answer. They're going to seize that uniform, and they are going to do a thorough investigation. I think this country is really a big joke, really and truly. I want the TTPS to tell me that they're getting court orders to lock up the gang leaders in this country. I want the TTPS to tell me that they're approaching the court in order to secure convictions for all the murders of these little children, 6-year-old, 7-year-old, 11, 12-year-old in this country. I don't know the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service is more concerned about a camouflage uniform. What about the Trinidad and Tobago Regiment, splint shells that is continuing to be found at those sites, those murder sites? What about the TTPS, splint shells and live rounds that they gather in from homicide in this country? What about that? What about the investigation in that? What about the investigation to determine who firearm, if it's TTPS or Trinidad and Tobago Regiment firearms that committing this onslaught on our society? What about that? That's not important. But what's important is to go to the cemetery, dig up a corpse, take out, seize camouflage uniform, and charge somebody for that. That is what is important. Boys, a bunch of jokers running this country, yes? Bunch of jokers. That is one. Secondly, I want to address attorney at law Gerard Ramdeen. Mr. Ramdeen, I heard what appears to be an interview with you and Alan, recently. And I think, Mr. Gerard Ramney, that you have made statements uninformed. It seems as though that you did not take the time to listen to this gentleman press conference, the MP for Mayaro, Rushton Paray. It seems as though that you had no knowledge of the situation that you were explaining, that the United National Congress only seems to be criticizing and criticizing. But if you pay attention to the MP press conference, you would have heard that the MP states that the UNC welcome this announcement, and the UNC also believe that it holds excellent potential for the future of this country in relation to energy. You would have heard exactly what the MP stated. Before you go in the public and make, and I would expect a man of your caliber, before you make uninformed statements to the public, that is not easy. It is not easy to retract. That you will examine, look for all the evidence that is available before you go publicly and speak in that tone. And to the end of the day, you may very well have to come and retract your statement. I am saying in this country is free. People have the authority and the responsibility to be a part of any political party that they choose. That is your right. That is everybody's right. People can choose to support the PNM. They can choose to support the UNC. They can choose to support one of the third splinters. That is your right. That is everybody's right. But to the end of the day, when you're going to speak and condemn a party without having the information that is in the public domain, what you simply do is make yourself an idiot. That is what it is. Plain and simple. So to the end of the day, people must get their facts straight before they speak. That is what all of us must do. Get your facts. This is facts, not fiction. When we speak here, we give you the facts. We don't go on here saying what a man think and what he feel, because that don't hold water. When you're speaking in the public domain, you must bring the facts to the public so that the public will be aware of any given situation. Not like the Trinidad and Tobago media houses. Not like the propaganda machine that we have for the PNM that pose as media. Not like that. Bring the facts. And if we have the media houses in this country bringing the facts, the unadulterated facts to you, the people, then the people would be able to make informed decision. The media houses in this country, you are guilty of a serious crime. You, the media houses, you are the defenders of democracy in this country. And if you are the defenders of democracy, then bring the facts to the people and let the people make their decision. That is what we asking people to do. I want to welcome the MP for Mayaro to the program. I know that he has taken time off from his schedule to be here this afternoon after a short notice. And he was very, very excited when I asked MP Paray to come to this program this afternoon and to give us a whole synopsis of the whole Dragon field and some of the things that I may very well want to look into a little later on, and is the benefit to us from this deal, one, and also what constraints might very well appear, because we have seen MP that in Russia, because of the conflict with Ukraine and because of the intervention of NATO, we have seen that Putin closing the pipeline whenever he wants and opening the pipeline whenever he wants. So this is one of the things I will want to look at later on in the show. While we may very well be excited, and we should be, but to the end of the day, we have to look at the pros and cons and what could result as what could happen as a result of conflicts that is going on. We know that Venezuela is not in a good place with the US and other countries. So that is something we'll look at a little later on in the day. So I want to welcome you to the program, and I will ask the MP to start by giving us a little opening remarks on what he believes and the way he feel about this deal that was announced by the Prime Minister, MP Paray.
Thank you very much, Victor. Thank you for inviting me to your program. And it's always a pleasure to come and chat a little bit, share the information that I have, the knowledge that I have, and perhaps bring some clarity to some person's mind at the end of the day. So let me start from the outset. Gerard Ramdeen is my good friend. We've been friends for many, many years, and I suspect we'll continue to be so for many, many years to come. I did hear excerpts of Mr. Ramdeen's interview on Ian Allen's program, and I do want to share some information that I would have had, things that I would have presented on Sunday at our opposition press briefing, and then a little bit earlier on today I did another statement on the matter. So first of all, I want to make some broad headings, and I'm speaking here on the position of the United National Congress, in that we believe and we maintain that any gas at this point in time, whether it come by pipeline, by boat, by ship, or if it falls from the sky, it is good for Trinidad and Tobago.
Beautiful. Let
me make that very, very clear. Secondly, our position is that this arrangement that has been cleared for transaction by the United States vis-a-vis the U.S. Treasury Department, all the U.S. Treasury Department has done, and we must give kudos to the Prime Minister and his technocrats. I mean, it's a lot of lobbying that would have happened in Washington over the last, I would say, 18 months and so on. They went after it. Whether he had his lobbies, whether his people, whether he, whatever happened. So a fair amount of work would have been done from the state side to get to where the U.S. State Department has agreed to lift the sanction, or what you call a partial sanction, for that field alone. So the U.S. Treasury Department has not lifted sanctions against Venezuela. Now, these sanctions have tight control over a lot of things. One, assets owned by foreign operators in Venezuela. There's a control and sanction on that. Foreign operators, personnel, workers are sanctioned against working in Venezuela. They sanction money transactions. Now, if I want to bring some clarity to that, U.S. currency is an asset of the United States government. You don't own U.S. currency. You trade in U.S. currency. So issues around money laundering and, we have our FATF regulations and so on, Financial Action Task Force regulations, which is basically originating from the United States. It is really to manage and control the movement of U.S. currency. So when the United States State Department, through effective lobbying by the Trinidad and Tobago government, because they want this gas, and I can tell you why they want the gas. The stakeholders in the Trinidad and Tobago energy sector have been lobbying for the last couple of years to bring more gas, because we have a shortfall right now of about 2 billion standard cubic feet of gas that is needed to feed our Point Lisa's industrial estate. That's why we have some mothballing of the methanol plants and so on. So we have a reduction in operation. So obviously the stakeholders, which are part of this bigger, wider energy chamber, would have been asking the state, do something to bring us more gas, whether we have to get Lauren Manatee going, Dragonfield, whether we do more exploration on the deep waters, which we will talk a little bit more, but somehow find some more gas. So that lobbying has happened. The United States government, for its own political reasons as well, because, you know, it is always geopolitics playing at that level. There must be some credible advantage to the United States, one, to have access to more gas, from a humanitarian perspective, that we're looking after the Venezuelan people in a way as well. They have lifted that sanction for that field alone, with one or two caveats, and the main caveat is the Trinidad and Tobago government cannot pay for the gas with US currency. They can't pay for the gas with US currency. Now, I don't know if that means they could pay with pounds, rupees, bolivars, I don't know. But the arrangement is that US dollars will not be traded for gas. So when the media asked Prime Minister Rowley what will be the method of payment, he indicated that there are several ways of paying, which he may be correct. Medicine, food, and so on. If there is any other things for payment, electronic currency, we have other things now. Some of those things may require legislative amendments in our whole fiscal regime as well. But the point is, the hardest hurdle to cross is how are we going to pay for this at the end of the day. So that is what has been lifted. There has been, to my knowledge, no conversation between the Venezuelan government as to an agreement of how this transaction is going to happen. No conversation around that. And for my information as well, I don't think there was any three-way conversation, even during the negotiation in Washington. I think Venezuela was left out of that conversation as well. And that could prove a problem later down the road, right? Yeah. And finally, in my opening conversation, geographically, the Dragon Field sits in Venezuelan territorial water. It is in Venezuelan territorial water. We do not own any infrastructure on that side. We do not have a claim, or like how you have Lauren Manatee, which is half and, well, 3/4 and 25% on our side, 75% on the Venezuelan. So you have some joint ownership of the field. In the Dragon Field issue, you only have Venezuelan ownership. So what has to happen, basically, if we are taking out the licensing agreements part, because that is a whole conversation by itself. Let's assume we had no licensing agreement to deal with it. There's something called a horizon window from acceptance to production. In these type of fields, you're looking at anywhere between 3 to 5 years, because there's a lot of analysis that has to be done. You have to look at layout, weather patterns, dry season, wet season plays an important role in executing a project like this. Then you have a piece of subsea pipe. They'll have to build a platform. On the Venezuelan side, has to build a platform to do the drilling and so on. And then there's some subsea pipe work, because this is on the, if you picture Trinidad and Tobago, picture Shaka Shikari at the tip where Venezuela is. The Dragon Field lies north of that. So basically a subsea pipeline has to run from that platform or that field, connect to Hibiscus, which is in our territorial water. And we already have infrastructure from Hibiscus down the Gulf of Paria into the Atlantic LNG field where the gas is going to be piped and processed. So you're talking about 3 to 5 years before we produce 1 standard cubic feet of gas. So our position, while we accept that this is good for the country, it is good for energy feedstock, this 350 million standard cubic feet of gas, while it is not enough to fill the gap that there is, it is sufficient to bring considerable amount of revenue to us as a country. It is sufficient to give a lifeline to our feedstock folks at Point Lisa. And there are issues around that we have raised, because my position was, as an opposition party, our job is not to rubber stamp. We are not here to sing Dr. Rowley's praises. His party can do that, his people can do that. Our job is to look at the periphery of this whole arrangement, identify weak areas, and encourage the government to work on it. So if this window is 5 years, what are we going to do from now until 2027? Just bask in the glory that we have 350 million standard cubic feet of gas coming? What are we going to do? And this is what we demand that the state do. Are we revisiting our fiscal arrangements to make our deep waters, where all the experts tell us that our nearshore fields are the mature stage, they have much oil and gas inside again. However, our deep water blocks have a lot of gas and oil. But it is risky and it is expensive to explore. What can we do today in terms of our fiscal regime, in terms of encouraging more international players to come in, invest their money, search for this oil and gas in deep waters, that we can bring new feedstock within the same time frame. So perhaps in 28, 29, rather than bringing 350 million standard cubic feet of gas, we might be able to bring 1 billion. And you know, more to the party, more the merrier. And we could talk about those things in some detail, each one of them by itself. So the bottom line here, to respond to the vast amount of persons. I know it wasn't only Gerard alone, because I saw it on Facebook. There were a lot of people saying that the UNC is crying this down. We are not nationalistic, and that wasn't the case. The narrative is being said falsely. Dr. Lee, who did his release as well, he too in his release is the shadow for energy, is the substantive shadow for energy. He did make the case in his news release that we are supportive of it, and we are happy, we're glad. But there are things that must be addressed. We have issues inside the energy sector. You know, we have issues of legislation, old legislation, the STPs, the profit sharing arrangements. All of these things would be hamper to new developments, new exploration capacity and so on. Those are the things we highlighted, and that is our job. That is our job, to highlight these things while the government bask in the glory that, you know, they've gotten somewhere with this particular dragon field issue. So we can tackle a few issues inside here as we go along.
Well, you raise a very pertinent point, because the tone of international investors, we have seen that the government of the day weren't able to attract international investors in the country. I think one of the reasons why the government cannot attract international investors is simply because the international community do not trust the regime. I think they have seen the behavioral pattern of the regime in terms of even constitutional matters, that they flaunt that. And I mean, when you are looking at the international business community to come into your country to invest money, they want to ensure that there is some sort of stability. They want to ensure that legislation will protect their assets. They want to make sure that there's a government that they can trust. So how do we deal with that going forward?
So that is one area when we speak of a periphery of issues that we must address as a country. So you talk about the investment climate. Now, I shadow trade and investment as my portfolio in the parliament. And for the last couple of years, I've raised the matter of the ease of doing business. The ease of doing business is one of the most critical aspects for foreign investors. How easy it is to do business in your country. And when you look at the length of time it takes to get simple things as power connection, water connections, when you look at the fact that the customs and excise take so long to bring in new equipment, it's a hassle, it's a paperwork hassle. You lump that from a domestic business purpose, right? We talk about the investment climate in the energy sector. So there's a consultant firm called Rystad that I had the privilege to look at a presentation over the last 2 days at the Energy Conference, the United National Congress. We took the position this year that it is important that as a party that representatives be sent to that conference and sit in and listen to what the stakeholders have to say. Myself and Senator John attended for the 2 days, and we participated in a lot of the panel discussions in terms of being there to listen to what they're saying, what the stakeholders were saying. And then we went and we met with the stakeholders. We met with the BPTT president, the chief executive officer at Proman. We met with folks at Heritage. A lot of the energy stakeholders, a lot of them from stakeholder service companies as well, to get a better understanding of what the issues are. Because we are legislators in this country. We are policy makers for a government that is sitting and waiting for governance. And if we don't understand our stakeholders' need, and I was quite frank with all of them, I said, look, our job here is not to come and bash the government with you. Our job is to understand you as the player. What is the government doing that you're happy with? What are they not doing? And we form the government tomorrow morning. How do we address those issues? Because we want to make sure that you are the lifeblood. Energy will be the lifeblood for this country for another 15, 20, 30 years. Jump high, jump low. We could diversify overnight if you want. And diversification is important. Economic transformation is important. But the fossil fuels will be our lifeline. And if we as a party, as a government in waiting, as policy maker, don't understand what the client wants, well, when we some problem. So that's why we're there. So Rise started, had a lot of charts where they were looking at the investment climate. There were 3 or 4 areas that, they suggested that Trinidad and Tobago must address to bring more interest into our region to look for oil and gas. And one of the most alarming things that I saw was that Trinidad and Tobago was ranked 2nd in this hemisphere, and I suspect it may not be in this hemisphere, globally. They were ranked 2nd. We have the 2nd highest profit sharing ratio amongst oil producing nations. Now what does that mean? It means basically there's a number of layers on how a government makes money when you have a drilling operation, an oil production operation. Royalty taxes, supplemental taxes, profit sharing, and so on. Now profit sharing is really the major one. And in Trinidad and Tobago, our profit sharing arrangement is about 62%. Right? Now, the best deal is always the best deal for anybody. And I will not take away that we must get the best deal at the end of the day. That is our right, that is our oil, and we need the best deal. But where is the best deal? Where does the best deal land? We have a situation where capital has choices today. Trinidad and Tobago is what you call a mature province. We've been drilling oil since the 1970s. Our nearshore, our land-based operations are always a bit difficult in terms of the risk to put in to get your oil operation going. Capital can also find themselves in what you call new and emerging fields. Right. Because with shale, with the advent of shale, as you know what shale is, it's gas pockets in lower depth strata that is basically easier to pull out than having to do deep exploration drilling. So capital could go to your mature provinces like Trinidad, new and emerging provinces where oil is now being found, and in some of those that have actually started to drill, their profit sharing margins are in the lower 30s, upper 30s into 40%, which is a huge amount lower than us. And then as you have boards of directors of major companies, as they get more climate conscious with COP and our responsibility to the United Nations in terms of climate control, decarbonization, and so on, boards are saying, hello, we will authorize you to only spend 40 or 50% of the investment in fossil fuel. The rest has to go to renewables, air, wind, solar, hydroelectric. So capital today has 3 places to go. And if your province is not attractive, then the capital will go to emerging provinces or in renewables. Last bit of point on that particular issue is Stuart Young sat in the panel. He was in the opening panel, the first day. I'm a businessman. I run 15, 20 business. I run from parlor, come right back to supermarket. I don't know what Stuart run in his life. I don't know. I don't know if he's a businessman. I understand he's a very good attorney, and I have no doubt that. But you can't start a negotiation by telling your people, your partners, your investors who are sitting in front of you. Say, if Trinidad and Tobago don't get the best deal, there will be no deal. You don't start a negotiation like that because you don't know what is the best deal for Trinidad and Tobago. You will start to talk. So how do you know what is your price point? How do you know what's your price point? You haven't analyzed. You haven't gotten the persons who want to talk to you for you to understand the nature of their business. What are their choices? What are their options? Perhaps 60% was good for us in the 1960s. We don't know if 60% is real or rational in 2023 where there is so much options. And to my great surprise, he made that statement. And I'm sitting here as a businessman in shock. How can you make a statement like that? And it forced me to remind Minister Young that 100% of zero is zero. Yeah. And 1 is greater than 0. And clearly he don't understand that matter. So that was something very surprising to me as a man who's at the helm. But there's a cockiness about these guys and them. I think they fly first class to Washington very, very often, and I think that gives them about an air of superiority about themselves at times.
Or it's probably the attitude of their leader probably trickle down.
Absolutely.
Because you cannot, as you rightly said, you cannot start to negotiate with arrogance.
That's correct.
You just can't start there. Yeah. But be that as it may, we are very well aware of the behavior of this government and the Prime Minister, so we'll expect that the ministers will behave in such a manner. But coming back to this deal, I have done some research prior when this topic was hot and so on, and I also noticed that Shell were the company really that was selected to do the piping.
That's correct.
To bring that gas from Venezuela to Hibiscus.
Yes.
I also know that there was more or less a cost that was in place. But what strikes me in this discussion is that how could we move forward if there is negotiations between Trinidad and the United States and there is not a three-way negotiation? That is what I'm trying to understand, because while Trinidad may very well be in a good position by having the US say, okay, we will lift the sanctions on that particular item, but the rest remains. So then how we move forward without a discussion with the third party, which is the important player in this whole thing? So I am trying to just analyze in my brain how the whole system will work, because the announcement we have from the Prime Minister is it seems as though that there is this negotiation was completed here between us and the US, and now it seems as though that he will have to now go to negotiate between Venezuela and Trinidad, and then have to go back to the US, because let's just say the Venezuela decide, well, look, we want cash, we want the greenback, we want to see the greenback flowing, and the US say, well, no, greenback not flowing, then we still between a rock and a hard place. But tell me something, MP, from where you sit in relation to what you shadow, how viable you think that this operation would be from Venezuela to Trinidad?
So we need gas at Atlantic LNG. We have an empty train 1, which has been mothballed because we don't have enough gas. And train 2, 3, and 4, the government recently renegotiated with the owners or the shareholders, and they took out the complexities of the train. And let me explain what the complexity is. And every train had partners, and your partner gas could go in train 2, but that gas couldn't go in train 3. Some gas that could go into 4 couldn't go into 1, and so on. So from my understanding is that has been sorted out, and gas from anybody could go gas in any train, because we want gas and we want to sell LNG. So whatever is the mechanics and the arrangement between the partners and the government, I think the government took its shares from train 1, which is what NGC has, and put it into the other trains and so on. So I'm not too clear, because that was privileged information. There was excerpts of it came out at sometimes when Minister Young speaks, or even the Prime Minister speaks, they give a bits and pieces. But the point is, they have sorted out that gas contract arrangement as to who gas goes where. But the point is, we need gas. The quickest way to bring gas to LNG is to pipe it from some other place that is producing gas. We are fortunate to have a very close neighbor that has gas. And I can tell you, the Dragon Field, it is estimated that there is 10 trillion standard cubic feet of gas in the Dragon Field, which is a considerable amount of gas. Now, piping gas into your facility is nothing new. You opened your conversation about Russia turning off pipes. And there are pipes that run from Russia to Germany to other European states that they pipe the gas via pipeline straight into the electric companies and so on. Right now, there is a lot of shale gas in the southern United States that is piped to the west coast of Mexico for shipping to Asia, to Japan. So piping gas is nothing new. And as I said, we are very fortunate to have huge gas reserves in relatively short distances compared to what Russia has to do with Germany and so on. So to get the fastest way to get gas to Atlantic LNG is through pipeline. And why is Atlantic LNG a good place for a good business? The age of Atlantic LNG is that Atlantic LNG is the lowest producer of gas in the world. So there's an attraction for us to operate Atlantic LNG because we have capitalized or depreciated the cost of that facility over years. If you were to build the newest, most modern LNG facility anywhere in the world, the cost of production is going to be a lot more because they now have to compensate for their loans, their interest, their depreciation and so on their new asset, whereas Atlantic is the cheapest in the world. So Atlantic is a good, viable business. The problem is that we just don't have enough gas to move that the capacity that Atlantic have. So to answer your question, yes, piping gas is good. It is feasible. It has been done all over the world in terms of a risk, in terms of risky business. It is well managed. It's an old standard. It's an old operating standard. You are oil man yourself. I shouldn't say old, but you are oil man yourself. So you've seen pipes in operation and so on. So that is an option that works for us as well. And if at some point in time Laura and Manatee can come on stream as well, that will be good news for us too. But as I said, there is always the issues around that we must be very cautious of how we manage these arrangements. And in this particular area with the Dragon Field, there would have been conversation, contractual conversation, commercial conversations prior to the sanctions. Because we were talking Dragon gas way before the sanctions. Right. So Shell and Trinidad and Tobago will own that infrastructure through whatever investment arrangement they are making as partners to get the subsea pipeline to Hibiscus and so on. I'm not sure what is the arrangement, whether Shell and the government is building the platform in Dragon, I do not know. Perhaps they may be doing, if they're doing that, that's fine as well. It's an investment for the state in terms of bringing the gas back to us. But the sanctions would have created a different dynamic if we were going to base a 2018 or 29 commercial agreement. Because the key here, the key reason, the key issue that I think changes the design of that commercial agreement is that in the old commercial agreement, we were going to pay a cash. In this new arrangement, there shall be no cash transactions. So how do you pay? How much medicine can we sell? How much food can we sell? And it brings another question. Remember in 2016 or 17, at the advent of this humanitarian crisis in Venezuela, our manufacturers had sent about $50 million in food supply to Venezuela. I wonder if they pay for it. I don't know if that bill has been settled as yet. So if you are talking about a commercial arrangement for $50 million between Venezuela and Trinidad and Tobago, and I can't tell you whether that bill was paid. I didn't hear the manufacturer say anything, whether it was paid in part or paid in full. What happens when we have a contractual arrangement for billions of US dollars and we can't settle on a simple 50 million TT1? Those are the complexities of the arrangement. And you're talking about a window of 3 to 5 years, and we ain't touched the commercial part as yet. That could push to 7 years. So our challenge is that you're trying to bask in the glory. And as the examples I gave you earlier on, is that it's like you apply for an HGC house, and after 4 years you get an acknowledgement letter, and you run and tell everybody you get the house, and you start fetting and throwing out all your old wardrobe and store, and you're going to say, well, you're putting new thing in new house. But all you got was an acknowledgement letter. You haven't done the mortgage, you haven't done the mortgage assessment, and you have no allocation as yet. That is where we are. All we've gotten is an acknowledgement letter that it is all clear to proceed to operate in the dragon field, nothing else. So, does the government come and change its fiscal spending policy at a macro level and say, we have money coming, and then we start giving people this false hope that, things is better, things is nice. 1 minute the Prime Minister said things looking bad, now he said things looking good, and then they're looking bad again. So, we were issuing warnings to the state. Do not set the citizens up. Your exuberance could set us up. And that is something that we were warning as an opposition, as a loyal opposition. We are looking at the issues, and our job is always to poke holes at the best things. And if it has merit and water can leak, well, then fix it. If we try to poke holes and there is no hole, well, then you've done your job, and then we've done our job. So our job is to poke holes, see where there are weaknesses or there are kinks in the armor, and we give you an opportunity to fix it, and that's what we're doing. We're doing our job as an opposition.
But would this deal, from where you sit, requires legislative changes?
No, because we are a mature province. I think our petroleum legislation from the 1970s come back. While it is, to me, my respectful view, and when you listen to experts like Mr. Anthony Paul and so on, talk about the need for legislative amendments, for changes. There is serious issues concerning the granting of licenses. There's issues with what you call transfer pricing, where product leave Trinidad and Tobago, and we pay tax on $3.04 US. They bulk it in cargo ships, let it rest in the ocean for 4 months, 3 months, and then Japan says, I want 2 load, and we pay you $15 US a load, $15 US per MMBTU, right? And then we lose all the tax revenue, because when it left Trinidad, it didn't leave for Japan. It didn't leave Trinidad at $15 per MMBTU, it left at $3. Transfer pricing, and then sometimes you can't bill in Trinidad because the tax regime here is 30%. But you bill it by a subsidiary in Ireland or New Zealand or wherever, where the tax regime might be 10%. So there is weaknesses in the fiscal regime for transfer pricing, issues around the licenses, SPTs, because it's old. The situation from the Arab days, the Arab War in the 1970s, when this legislation came before our parliament in the 70s, that situation has changed. So there is a bunch of work that has to be done from a legislative perspective, and we need the brightest people for that. The government needs the brightest people, but the UNC need the brightest people for that as well, right? Because there are a number of international, things that have changed globally. The way how foreign companies look at international partners, we have to update the legislation. So to answer your question, as it stands, we will need no additional legislation, because we can work the old legislation as it is, with all the weaknesses and nuances of it. So there's nothing stopping us legislatively from this deal going forward.
So let's look at the global and political risk of this situation. I started off earlier on by drawing a reference where we are now seeing, because of the conflict in Russia, the behavior of the president in relation to even sending gas to the countries who would have been supportive of him over the years, but not supportive of this action in Ukraine. Now, we know that Russia is also a key player with Venezuela. We know Venezuela, Russia, we know some of the Middle East countries that the US consider to be hostile to the US. They are also players in the Maduro fraternity. How serious that risk could affect us after going through all the deals and probably spending billions upon billions of dollars. And then if for some reason we have seen fallout, we know that President Putin is very strong-headed. We know that the president of China, North Korea, and all these areas that Maduro more or less is in bed with, they are really hostile to the US. Are you seeing that we could also be exposed to serious risk with this situation? Or you think that based on the negotiations, it might be a clear deal? What is your thoughts on that?
You had asked a question earlier on about how does our foreign partners look at us if our judiciary is weak, if our legal system is weak, if they believe that they cannot get justice in the event there is a conflict, whether contractual or otherwise, if they believe that they cannot get justice in this jurisdiction, they're not going to come. If they feel that their intellectual property cannot be protected in our laws, they're not going to come. And all of these things create a very weak judicial system in this country that could be a huge turn-off for new players. The old fellas and them who've been here for years, they would have already, settled themselves in, know how to maneuver themselves around. Local attorneys who know the law, they'll be able to spin things how they want it. But for new and emerging partners, they're going to look a little differently. That being said, the United National Congress has come in for a lot of licks over the years, over the last couple of years, as our political leader had made a stand on terms of her support for Mr. Guaido as the opposition leaders back then. Now I can tell you at that point in time that was not done in a vacuum. You had our largest trading partner, which is the United States, was lending support. England, Great Britain, was looking at Mr. Guaido as the de facto president, as the case may be. And as you know, they would have seized a lot of their accounts and so on in Venezuela. Great Britain is a very close partner of ours as well. So the political leader didn't wake up one morning and decide that she just wants to support Mr. Guaido. It was based on sound advice
Right.
from her advisors in terms, who is looking at the issues of foreign policy and so on. Now, it is easy to tell somebody today, well, you make a wrong decision back then. But when you are looking at your environment today, you make the best decision that you can. And it was a good political decision at that point in time that the leader made. Now, one can say because of changing geopolitics between the United States and Venezuela and the Russian-Ukraine crisis and conflict has turned the geopolitics upside down, the United States government has had to look at lifting and easing certain sanctions on Venezuela to be able to access some oil and gas as well for Citgo, because Citgo is the Venezuelan company that operates in the United States. And you're talking about 4,000 gas stations, about 3 refineries. You're looking at the impact of employment, the moving of gas and oil and so on into their retail market. So all of these things they take into consideration. So there has been some shift in Venezuela politically in terms of how the United States now look. I think Mr. Guaido has now been removed as a figurehead in the National Assembly, and there's a 5-man team that is running the National Assembly now. So to answer the question whether it is a risk, whether Venezuela can pose a risk to us as what is happening in Russia, where they threaten to turn pipelines and things off, I can tell you this. Historically, the Venezuelan government has, I don't want to use the word invaded, but has rushing into platforms and seized operations in the past. BP global platforms were boarded by Guardia Nacional and seized, men thrown out and locked up and carried back to Venezuela. They historically, basically, they can seize anything sitting in their land. So the question is, whatever we put on paper, And think about this for a second. I want to be devil's advocate here for you. 2 years down the road, the United States has to make a decision on Venezuela. And Trinidad and Tobago, because of the geopolitics, and that, United States, through the Caribbean Basin Initiative, we get about $400 million worth of purchasing power through CBI annually. I think it's a little bit more now. The US government says, guys, we need you to support us. We need you to vote at the OSS in this particular matter. And again, because of geopolitics, we have to vote and support the United States. And Venezuela says, what is stopping them from sending two boats to the Guardian National and that platform in Dragonfield and turn off all them valves for it? Now, thankfully, as a mature province, we have other sources of gas. What's happening in Germany and France and England and so on? Their one source is the pipeline, so it's easy, in Ukraine and Czechoslovakia and so on. Those places is one pipeline company, so it's easy to turn a valve off and you strangle them. We still have multiple feeds from our East Coast Marine Block that we're bringing gas through Cassia and so on the East Coast. So we do have feed. So if 10% or 12% of our feedstock is coming through Venezuelan pipeline, then you limit your risk to 15 or 20%. And that has to be a policy decision that we have to make because we cannot deny global events. We cannot deny that we have partners here in the Caribbean who we may want to supply gas and so on too, that we have to think about them as well. So of our total feedstock, we may have to decide, look, we will not allow more than 15 or 20% feedstock to come from Venezuelan pipelines or Venezuelan controlled pipelines. Because if there is ever a lock-off, then how can we keep our other feeds? And then we have to use it for our power generation, our plant. But then we have a commitment to our small islands going up the road. We need to run their power plants and so on because what would eventually happen as more gas becomes available for our small island states, they would look to upgrade their electricity facilities from diesel. As the whole concept of decarbonization kicks in more and more and more as a global conversation, countries will be demanded to remove operations that using a lot of diesel and gas and so on for reduction in carbon in the environment. So they may want to upgrade their plants and so on to natural gas turbines and stuff. So all of these are regional security and energy concerns, which I have no doubt that our technocrats are looking at right now. I mean, I had the pleasure of speaking with the PS in the Ministry of Energy on Monday as well. Very bright lady. I mean, we were talking about carbon sequestration. Carbon sequestration is where we have a plan in this country that at some point in time, we're going to take from all our manufacturing companies, take their output, their effluent, their carbon, right, capture it, and we will pipe it or we will cargo it on trucks, and then we'll go into our land-based reserves that we've taken out the oil from. And in those empty reservoirs, we're going to dump the carbon inside of it and seal it off. And then what we can use with some of the carbon as well, use it as what you call gas lift. You'd be familiar with gas lift. Some of those old fields, you throw the carbon down, you bring up whatever oil and gas in those old mature fields. So I have no doubt that our technocrats are well ahead of the game. But, it's how would we manage those things at a policy level to make sure that we don't constrain ourselves to Venezuelan gas, which is what we need. We will need Venezuelan gas if we want to continue bringing up that 2 billion standard cubic feet shortfall in the shortest time. So if we take another year, or we take another 2 years just to get a foreign company, ExxonMobil, which is doing a fantastic job in the Stabroek field, they have the technology, the science, the people are ready for deep water exploration. We need to encourage them to come here. Come here, and the window for that could be another 7 years. You understand? So piping gas from Venezuela is still our most feasible option at this point in time, with a shorter window, even at the Laura and Manatee field, which if we can expedite the arrangement, that's something that I made clear in the conference as well, in that we must address our systems, our process and procedures to cut that time frame down. Some fields take 10 to 15 years before you can start to produce.
And we have Guyana doing it in 4.
Guyana doing it in 4. And that's the point we were making. So the counter argument to that was, well, Guyana is a little different. But it can be done. And I've heard some of our technocrats say, well, the EMA process alone is 2 years. Well, it is 2 years because you had 3 men on the work. If you resource these agencies well, give them the manpower, give them and do what Donald Trump did. When President Trump came into power, the first thing he did, because remember he's a pro-energy man, he had the Halliburton man as his man of business as well, and they want to go after every bit of fuel, oil and gas, anyway, whether it's in the tundra, whether it's in an environment zone. But he told their EMA, he said, fellas, listen, you can't hold up these people for 5 years. So he signed an executive order and said, listen, you had 24 months to do your job. And if you can't finish your job in 24 months, grant the approval. So he turned it around and he said, listen, whatever you need, I will give it to you as president. You want manpower, equipment, technology, look it. But you will not put these people who want to invest their money in a holding pattern for 5 years. So there is room to maneuver, and as engineers, when we look at risk, when you're looking at the risk, you either remove yourself from the risk as your best option or remove the risk away. And if you can't remove yourself from the risk, you engineer it out. You put whatever you need to do to engineer it out. So those things, through policy, through legislation, where you give timelines and deadlines, you can engineer those things to make sure that you can reduce that window from 10 and 12 years to 5 years and 3 years and 2 years, as the case may be.
Listening to the tone from the Prime Minister with this deal, the tone, I am very skeptical that we may very well fall into the place where we don't want to be. And that is depending heavily on Venezuela, because I have seen, I am looking at some historical events with Venezuela, because when this announcement were made, I started to read up on, and I started to go back because I was following this whole Dragon Field deal with Shell and the activities that Shell will perform and the way in which discussion that took place with Stuart Young and the Prime Minister and Rowley in countries where the Russian counterparts were invited. I went back and looked at all that, and looking at the whole scenario. From where I sit, I am seeing a serious risk that is existing there, because Venezuela, the culture of Venezuela is not Trinidad.
That's correct.
The behavior of Venezuelans is not Trinidadian behavior. They, apart from being aggressive in terms of being dominant, we have to be careful that we don't treat this situation as the ultimate. And I listened to some talk show hosts today, and everybody is quite excited about this boom and this boom. And in my mind, I was saying, but look, we had about 2 or 3 oil boom in this country, and did Trinidad and Tobago really benefit? Or if I should break it down further, did the people of the country really benefited from the type of resources that came from those boom? So again, I say that to say this: while the opportunity is there, I think one of the key factors will have to be management.
Absolutely. Managing, and you see, it's not something that you manage after the contract. You have to manage it before the contract. Because when the contract or the agreement is signed, there is no walking over that again. Now you talk about the Venezuelan in terms of having a culture and a different attitude to us, and what they have is a clearer vision of what they want than Trinidadians.
Yeah, correct.
Understand?
Correct.
Sometimes we as a people, and I experience it every day as an MP, it is like we're not sure this is what we want. So we bubble and weave and we dance, and while that is happening, while we are procrastinating, somebody is going to market. Yeah. The Venezuelan culture, when you look at how they protest, They don't make joke. Gas went up by 5 cents, 10 cents, and 1 million people stormed downtown Caracas. They know we don't want that. Victor, you and man have been trying to arrange a few marches and so on, and you know, with the greatest of love and so for the people. But you literally beg men to come. And you're fighting a fight and you're fighting a cause on behalf of the people. And yet you have to encourage and coax and I mean, it's a challenge. And some cultures, you people walk down and say, I have had enough of this, and they down their tools and they walk out and they walk off. I have even warned businesses here in Trinidad and Tobago. I said, look, having Venezuelans on your staff is important. We need to support them. I mean, culturally, we need to put them to work. But do not have a ratio where you put more of them than our local boys and girls, with all the nuances that our boys and girls have.
Yeah.
All who want to smoke break 3 and 4 times for the day, and you want a day off because your child need to go and get a Q-Tex for graduation tomorrow and so on. When you have 50 and 60% of your employment as Venezuelan, because they work hard, they are hard workers, they give you your day's work for the day, but you cross these fellas and they will down their tools and they will demand and they will walk off your business, right? And they could shut your operation down because they're very, very cohesive. Now you take that at the very highest level of administration, that culture, in Venezuela, where you have men who are generals of armies running PDVSA, men who are trained to take instructions. They are not trained to negotiate and use judgment. You know, you get instructions, hey, run in there and shut that platform down and lock up everybody for me.
That's it.
That is the end of it. So your position of concern is real. From on our side of the border, a smart government would de-risk it by making a decision, how much pipeline gas from Venezuela do you want in your national feed? Because when you do a risk matrix, the risk of a diplomatic spat between Venezuela and Trinidad, for whatever reason, it may be a very high risk but low probability on your matrix. So we may never cater for that. If we decide it could be a high risk, low probability, but high impact. You see that high impact on the third axis? We will have to decide what is the impact. If 50 or 60% of our gas for our operations come through piped gas from Venezuela, where Venezuela has control or jurisdiction, well, then that's a big risk for us. You know, how do we deal with that? And we have to decide through policy that we can't allow that to happen. You know, so this is what I'm saying. On this side of the border, we have to continue an aggressive exploration menu. You know, we have to offer, and how do we offer? We have to make our incentives more attractive. And I can tell you, the increase in gas that we got in 2018 and 2019, that Stuart Young and the Prime Minister beat their chest. They talk about truck and they talk about the gas compression and all those things. If it wasn't for Kamala Prasad Bisesa and Kevin Ramnarayan as Minister of Energy in 2013 for adjusting that contract to allow them to allow the operators to invest in exploration, and they do something called accelerated capital depreciation. What does that mean? In normal accounting, you have a car in your books, you will depreciate it 4 times in 4 years to knock down the depreciation. As you know, depreciation is something that you charge against your profit, and your GP, your gross profit, and you take it out from your taxes. What had happened if Kevin and they did not do that, there would have been no new exploration, and we would have had no new gas in 2017 and 2018. So what we're saying, we have to look back at that model. Look back at that model, because deep water, to my understanding, is high risk, high cost, but high gain. Because the reservoirs will be deep and it will be full. So you would have a longer time to pump oil and gas out of it to get your return on your investment. But to take out a bit of the risk for for the shareholders, because shareholders of those energy companies, they could go in new fields that has lower risk. They could go on new nearshore fields that have newer risk, or they could invest in wind farms, solar, hydroelectric, nuclear, and forget us. So this is what I'm saying is that we need to have now, if we are pushing that we agree that fossil fuels is going to be with us here for the next 20, 25 years, and I mean President Ifran Ali, he made a very, very bold statement on Monday as well. And if you allow me to digress to what he said.
Yeah, of course.
He said, look, the world has caused an event to happen. We have X amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. It's causing a serious problem. Global warming and small island states like us will feel it the most. Because if we have a 2-degree warming again, within about 15, 20 years, you could see as much as 1.5 meter rise in sea levels.
Yeah.
Now think about that for Mayaro. Mayaro has 21 miles of beach from Manzanilla to Guayaguayari. We have a little over 7,000 homes, 18,000 people. And if that seawater start to rise, sea levels, and we have to move these communities, and we have to move west into the inner island, then we drop all these people into Rio Claro, which is about 200 feet above sea level. But what about our schools? We have 19 primary schools. What about these 2,000 children we have to put in schools, hospital, policing, water resources? These are real issues that climate change would cause. So decarbonization is the big conversation of how to reduce carbon, get the place a little cooler. Dr. Ali's position was, look, you have created this problem and now you're asking us, who have contributed the least to the problem, that we must find money to do a lot of the activities for decarbonization. Mia Mottley, Prime Minister Mottley, had made a bold statement as well. She told the global financial agencies, listen, that's small money. Put a fund with about 20 billion US dollars or 30 billion US dollars where we in Barbados and Trinidad and Tobago can access to build out all our facilities for carbon capture. We can do our reservoirs, we can do our carbon sequestration and so give you the money for it at low cost, or what you call access funding, which will be like 0.25% and 0.5%. So we are wanting money free, but give us low income money. So President Ali was like this. He said we are fossil fuel. We are fossil fuel in this region. Trinidad, Guyana, Suriname, you have Barbados doing some now, you have Grenada doing some now. We can secure our region for energy and put the money to the development of our people, which is critical in his mind. And we will do whatever we need to do on our coastlines and so on while we still work towards decarbonization. And it reminded me of a conversation that the Indian external foreign minister had made with a German reporter, and that's Jayasanka. And the German reporter put it to him that India was funding the war in Ukraine by purchasing oil from Russia. And his position was that, okay, well, when we go to buy oil, we don't ask where the oil coming from. We buy oil, and we want cheap oil. But Europe, you are buying gas. You are supporting, you are buying, you've bought more gas than we've bought oil, but you're not supporting the war. He says, you have adjusted your system, cut back where you could cut back, so you could put a little pressure on Russia and whatever. But you have done enough to protect your people. Right. And he says the GDP in Germany is about 24,000 US. He said with the greatest of respect, the GDP in India is 2,000 US. And we will do what is right for our people. And that was his bold claim. We will do what is right for our people. And he said this is not about standing on a fence, it's standing firmly on the ground. Come back to Trinidad and Tobago. Come back to the region in terms of we being a regional hub for energy where we can look after ourselves. And this is where the CARICOM comes in as well. What is the conversation happening at the CARICOM level? How does Guyana, Suriname, Trinidad as the biggest participants in the energy business? And if you take a bird's eye look at the region, Trinidad and Tobago as a gas producer, we have a stranglehold on the region. So we are the best place for gas processing in the whole region because there's no infrastructure coming on stream. Guyana has none, Suriname has none in terms of LNG, but it's with us. So we now have to capitalize that to make sure it does well for our people. And it brings your next question. Have we benefited from the last oil boom? And one cannot say we have not, but have we benefited sufficiently that we have changed our trajectory? Because in the 1970s, the Calypsonians, Black Stalin sang this song about, the problem with black man and feeling to party, and he made some bold statements and so on that about politicians and how we operate and how we behave. And when you look at Brother Resistance and you listen King Austin, The Price of Progress and so on, all these songs in the 70s and 80s, nothing has changed and we're in 2023. So how has that money changed our perspective? How has it changed our trajectory as a people? It hasn't. And what it is that is going to happen with this new oil or this new gas that we can bring from Venezuela if possible, do we do the same thing over and over again? I think that is your question.
So I was just about to say, with the oil boom and so on that we had good resources but bad management.
Bad management.
And when you have bad management, then it makes the resources that you have also bad.
That's
because
correct.
To the end of the day, it will not benefit significantly in terms of stabilizing the economy, even for the future generation. And the funds, the money that we have played with from the resources of this country from back then to now, my question is, how are we today in this position?
I think that's the question of the century, and folks have asked me that, right? Why we are how we are after all this money that has passed. And I want to just wax a little philosophy for you here, right? So bear with me for another 5 minutes on this. I have coined a phrase that...
Remember, you are the honored guest, so you have all the time you want.
Trinidad and Tobago, we are how we are from two areas. And the first area, from a political area, is that we are a 19th century parliamentary system trying to serve a 21st century audience, and we are constrained and confined by a Cold War relic called the Civil Service Act. And any sensible government with 33 seats right now to get your 3/5 majority, any government ever wins an election with 33 seats. Last time I think that was NAR, and I think the only thing the NAR would have done was made the Tobago House of Assembly Act, and I think they made some change to the Municipal Corporation Act, and that was all they did.
33.
But we need to change our civil service regulation. We need to rip that, we had to bury that through in the dump somewhere and create new modern legislation that creates for 24 operations in the Customs and Excise Service, 24-hour operations in the ports. We need to have a system where we can build roads in the night without incurring costs and this issue around unions and so on. And you can't do this and you can't do that. So that's one part. So that's it from the administrative political side. And then there's another part that I call that we suffer from what you call 10 degrees north. Now what is 10 degrees north? 10 degrees north is our geographic position along the line of latitude, right? So at 10 degrees north, we are 2 degrees below the hurricane belt. So 99.9% of the hurricanes, by the time it gets around to us, it curves and it goes up the hill. So we're in a safe place geographically from hurricanes. Trinidad and Tobago sits about 200 miles onto the continental shelf. So 8.0 on the Richter scale just throw down 2 coconut trees. And 2 coconut might fall.
I see where you're going, eh?
When you look at Trinidad Cement Limited, and never discount the great work TCL has done, we have had several heavy earthquakes in this country. All them old buildings standing up. All them, you might see a little crack on the wall, but the cement has held our houses together for one. Our old engineers and architects have built houses very good on our island. Give Jack the jacket. The last natural disaster that we've had to deal with at any scale was when the Red House fire burned down in 1903. The point that I want to make that we have been spared natural disasters in this country, and because of that, we have changed nothing. We haven't changed our thinking. We haven't changed the technology. We haven't changed the way how we operate as a people. But if you look up the islands, every time a hurricane passes and you blow down a country, Grenada build back, Barbados build back, St. Kitts build back. When they build back new, modern. I remember in 2005 or 6, somewhere around that, I had now started my cable TV operation. And we were running coax cable, going to Grenada for one of those Caribbean seminars. In Grenada running fiber to the home. And I say, but these people smaller than we, they have money like when them running fiber. Man say, well, after the last hurricane, we decided to go run fiber now. So our infrastructure, but more than infrastructure, the thinking. We haven't matured as a strategic because we haven't had cause to think. You get a hurricane to pass through this place. And this was annoying me when the hurricane passed and nothing happened, men was vexed in this country. Oh God, well thank God that the weather passed and it blew down nothing because the day did pass. And it blew down something. Victor, I don't know how many people know their neighbors on the street that they live in. If we were accustomed having to deal with natural disasters, I am sure we would have known every single neighbor who have a backhoe, who have a power saw, who have a tool that we need to cut a tree, move this, move that. The whole philanthropy about looking after your neighbor and so on in times of disaster, that is not part of our culture because we have not had to deal with those things. And this is why our Caribbean neighbors, they far more advanced sometimes in their thinking. So that's why I'm saying 10 degrees north has put us in a safe place. We've had to spend a lot of money in terms of infrastructure, re-engineering development. But look at Port of Spain, look at San Fernando, look at Rio Claro. We are bursting at the seams. And knock on wood, I'm not asking for a hurricane to hit us, but let's say there was to be a massive disaster, we have to rebuild. We will build new, proper spatial planning, sewer system, parks and recreation. We will have an opportunity to rebuild and redesign our space. That is not happening in Trinidad and Tobago. So physically, mentally, we are way back. So how do we answer your question? Always remember, Victor, we are not importing politicians from Barbados and Guyana and Suriname. We are not importing police officers. We are not importing teachers. The people who are governing our systems come from the belly of the communities that we've created. And if you as a citizen like what you're seeing at the top, well, then we're doing a good job. If you do not like what you're seeing at the top from your politicians, from your police, your firemen, your administrators, if you don't like what you're seeing at the top, who is to blame? Barbados, Guyana, Suriname? It means that we are doing a bad job in the home. Because you know why? We have grown accustomed of taking our children and putting them to babysit them in the school. Schools must never have to discipline children. Discipline children should happen in the home, in the living room. But we want teachers to discipline the child. We want the principal. We want the police to discipline them. Because we absorb ourselves of that responsibility as well.
So while we have been spared of natural disaster, we are not spared of political disasters.
Absolutely.
and that is a very I think political disasters is more devastating than natural disaster, because a natural disaster is something that could happen when we source funding and we build back and we get. But political disaster destroys the mind. And when political disaster destroys the mind, as it has done in Trinidad and Tobago, that is why we are really at this place today. Because we have allowed politicians to treat us as a disaster, and we have not in any way whatsoever stood up and stood out and demand, first of all, that we have good governance. I know there is some, even within the UNC, that have problems with me, because I am saying and will maintain and will continue to say that I am a supporter of good governance out of the UNC and in the UNC.
That's correct.
I am a supporter of democracy outside the UNC and in the UNC. I have no problem with that. And as I said before, I do have a problem. I do have a problem with that.
Yeah.
But the point I'm making here is this. Until the citizenry reach the point of maturity by looking out for what is best for the country and not our individual, actually you take some calls just now, not our individual selfishness where we believe, I want something and you get something, and once I can get something, I don't care. This country suffering, this country bleeding, this country need help. But the people to help the country is not the Bajan or the Vincentian, it is us. It is us, the citizens, have to help the country by demanding and standing for what is right. And this is something that if we doesn't set that in motion, we could get gas from Venezuela, we could get gas falling from the sky, it will be the same result. Because bad management and corruption will only produce one answer.
So I wanted, before you take the call, I want to respond to what you said. Because you are asking, how do we demand more?
Yeah.
Demand better from our leaders, our leadership, right? There are some people who do it, some people who are culturally inclined like you've taken some very strong positions in terms of what you believe in, and that I've seen that you are a man who willing to put it outside there to stand for what you believe in. But at a national level, we have not educated our children to be passionate about anything. And I want to be a little clear on that. Activism is not dragging for a tire and too long and burning it on the road. That's terrorism. I want to make that very, very clear. And as a member of parliament, we swear to uphold the law at the end of the day.
Yeah.
But we need activism from our education system. We need to teach maths and science and language and history from the point of activism. So, when we're doing chemistry in Form 1, 2, and 3, the chem teacher must take the children across to the beach and sit down and enjoy the fresh air, the ocean, and tell them, we must fight for this. Any decision that our society make that interferes with you sitting here today in a clean beach with this water that is pristine, with this air that is pristine, well, then that is your fault because you have to demand it. Right? We are not training our children. I'm not saying to train them to cost you in your own house either.
Yes.
But they must always be willing to stand up for something. And let me tell you, Abraham Lincoln said the best. People must never fear their governments. Governments must fear the people. And when people talk, governments must listen. But if we're not passionate about any bloody thing, man, we're not passionate about, you walk down your town center, the pavement crack up, you're twisting your ankle. But you can't demand that. You can say, hey, we need this to be fixed, tell your leaders, come out. But you see, there's always the political angle. Boy, that is my government, boy. So me going and protest, I will take the bad road. That's what happens sometimes in Mayaro. Sometimes in Mayaro, them taxi men, and I might tell them, well, let me protest, all they want to protest, let me go. Then nothing happens because, hey, that is my government, and me want them look bad. But the point I want to make is that we have to have a cultural shift in our education. And this is why, I want to point on something you could agree with me or not. When you read Standard 5 in the Nelson West Indian Reader, I remember the little red book, you read up to Columbus. And then you go to Form 1, you start back from Carib, Ararak, Europeans, French, whatever, until you reach Form 5. And when you reach around 1956, the history of Trinidad and Tobago stops. Why? Can you find a book today written by authors in this country about the 1970 revolution? You might find one or two manuscripts somewhere. I had to go on Amazon and search on Amazon to find a book by Raoul Pantin about the 1990 attempted coup. Why don't we have the history of Trinidad in the 60s, 70s, and 80s? Nobody's writing that anymore. What happened to Bridget Britton and all these people? There was a concerted effort by the PNM back in the 60s and so on to to stop the writing of the history to protect them. There's no history of this country. So you want to get children at a national level to be nationalistic and pride. You had to go on Google to read about Sata, Andrew Cipriani, Cola Rienzi. Who are our heroes? Who are our heroes? We listed anybody? We write a book about anybody yet? No, why aren't we doing that? It is a way that you suppress free thinking by controlling the narrative on what your history is. Because if you don't know your history, where you've been, you can't decide where you're going.
You know, it sent me to something in my head that I just will mention it, but we ain't going there. From that analysis, they sent me in my head to peep as to why the government really serious about getting into that Concordat. That is what it just said. That is what triggered my head right now. Triggered my head. And MP, I must say that apart from you being well articulated and knowledgeable in your endeavor, I think that what the country needs at this point in time is just a little more than passion. They need serious information, because I have tested this country from where I stand and from where I sit, and I have seen and recognized that the people in this country, MP, they are not educated about their own affairs in the country.
Agreed.
I have seen that people who I would expect to be bright individuals, when coming to simple fundamental rights from the Constitution, and that is why I am one of the advocates who is saying that whatever Constitution we have must be taught in school. So the children, the younger generation, would not be fooled as to all the imbroglio that took place with this president and this.
Victor, we had a book that we used called the Student's Companion. It was red, now I see green.
Yeah.
But there was a part on civics. There was a section on civics that the teacher would sit with us and we would talk about the role and function of the president, the prime minister, your MP. They talk about the legislature. They don't do that anymore. Your constituents don't know the difference between your MP or the role of the MP and the role of the council. They figure all of we must be in the drain together at the same time.
When I say that.
Right? And I will explain to them that yes, my matter, I can't go to the parliament and talk about the drain in front of Victor Roberts' house. I can talk about the provision of proper drain and roadway in the constituency, in the village. And I can demand that the minister get their technocrats to look at it, whereas your local government councillor can go on a hairpin and talk about a drain and a pothole and so on, because they have the space for that at council and they have the funding and the money to do those things. But you know, the whole issue around education, around, you know, we getting people who can do a little more thinking, you talked about, and I want to tread this piece very carefully, is that our education system, and Clifton Dakota, which is my school principal, God rest his soul, used to tell us this in St. Stephen's, fellas, when all you come out, I want all you to come out academic. I want all you to come out educated. But we are rolling out academics by the hundreds every day. But how many of those academics are coming out educated? And that's the problem. The schooling system, it is not creating critical thinkers anymore. We're passing exams. And it goes from the lowest school to the highest school. I've complained about that even in my daughter's school as well at Naparima Girls. And I said, you know, why the drive to pass exams? There's an interest to pass exams. So they train you from Form 5, from Form 4 to Form 5 to pass the exam. So when my daughter landed in Waterloo in Canada, where now she has to compete with Asian children, Indian children, European children who are doing philosophy from the time they're 6 years old, she moved from number 1 to number 800. And that's a problem she had. She was sad. Because she's now competing with 800 children above her who have been trained in critical analysis and thinking And that is something she had to adjust over the years, and she adjusted well.
Let me take this one.
Yeah, sure.
Welcome, caller.
Hello.
Welcome,
Yes.
caller.
Mr. Victor,
Yes, sir.
I'm in, you know.
You go ahead. We hearing you.
All right. Now, it is very important what Mr. Paray is talking about, eh? That man is very sensible. Because this topic on the dragon field, okay, is concerning the transportation of that gas from the dragon field to hibiscus. All right. Now, many questions and answers we need here. The first thing, this deal started in 2017 with the government and
You there? Like we lost him. So you're finishing the point with your daughter in...
Yeah. So now she had to compete with these children because she moved in Naparima Girls. She was in the first 2 and 3. She's a math scholar, by the way. So after the first year, it is in her mind and her soul that I'm not performing. So she calls home at night and she's complaining and she's crying, Daddy, Dad, I feel I make a mistake. I said, no, you make a mistake. You are now a small fish in a big pond. In San Fernando, you are a big fish in a little pond.
yeah.
Yes, sir.
You hearing me?
I hear you now.
Yeah, get cut off. Now, as I was saying, now, the deal, first to begin, before you start the project, we must have some business arrangement. How much, what percentage of the gas coming out of the ground will be paid for by the Trinidad government?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, get cut off again.
No, you go ahead. We hearing you. You talk, man.
Yeah. So, now, the arrangement is to we have to have the plan first. So if Venezuela not putting any money, which is obvious, to drill the wells and take out the gas, we must have some kind of arrangement to pay for this gas.
And Kola, you are right. That part of the discussion would definitely take place as they go along. This is just the section where the United States has removed some restrictions in relation to that field.
Yeah.
But going forward in terms of negotiation, that would be a whole process, and we hope to have some information as we go along with that.
No, just to probably follow what the caller was probably trying to allude to as well. Mm-hmm. When you're looking at these sanctions, right, you're talking about not only the money, but the money has been red flagged.
Yeah.
But remember, American operators or operators with American interests had to build the jacket, had to build the platform. So by lifting the sanction on the field, US operators can build a platform and a jacket to drop in the field. So you understand, the sanction is just not necessarily about the money and the gas, but it's all the players who have to build the platform, build the jackets, put in the equipment, put in all the necessary technical things inside there, the Honeywells and the man-machine interface. They are all American companies that may be governed by sanction because American assets cannot operate in a sanctioned country. So by lifting in that field, a Halliburton and a Tucker or whoever, they can now operate in the field to build the facility, build the pipeline. So that is part of when you lift the sanction, those things would happen. And I think he was talking about the money. In this particular case, the government of Trinidad and Tobago and Schlumberger is going to own the whole asset, I believe. And what is going to happen, it is like when Amoco has to drill in Trinidad waters, we will engage into a profit sharing contract with the Venezuelan government in the same form, same format, and we buy their gas from them. So basically, it's not a difficult process in terms of what has to happen. but it may be lengthy for negotiation based on the current issues that we're facing right now.
Thank you. Anybody else, Arch?
Yes.
Welcome, caller.
Good evening, Victor.
Go ahead.
This is Elsie Corino. Good evening, MP Paray.
Good evening.
Good evening, Archie. I'm glad to have you on, and Mr. Paray. Sometimes I just mix up with Dinesh Shambali. I just remember that Dinesh Shambali don't have no hair and you have hair. So I'm glad to have you on, man. Right? So basically, so I like what Archie did there when he put the dragon eating up Rowdy head. So that means that dragon coming for keep Rowdy and not Victor. So going after the right person.
Right.
So that means you're on the right track there, Archie. Nice one. Secondly, I listen, I not celebrate, listen, keep Rowdy and this dragon gas thing, this deal, it has nothing to celebrate yet. It has nothing to celebrate yet. Because Kevin Ramrine say, and Kevin Ramrine is the real person you want to listen to, you're not going to get anything from it until 2027. So it has nothing to celebrate. Petrol is still down and the road is still in a mess. And the price of fuel is still above $6 and $7 for premium, for super and premium. So listen, I don't have to celebrate here. So I don't know why anybody jumping up and celebrating and kissing this man Bamsi for every single thing. This national road pavement exercise is a big gimmick, right? It's a big gimmick. I don't know how everybody jumping up and licking this man Bamsi over every single thing. These business chambers, the law association, all these boards and all these people in the papers and even the media and the journalists. I'll go as far as saying Ramona and Fua and jumping up and kissing this man Bamsi and celebrating the PNM as if there's the greatest thing since sliced bread. I don't understand, brothers. I don't understand. This Christine Kangaroo, she said she had a chance. We gave you a chance already. We was president of the Senate, right? And she telling us judge her by her impartiality. So wait, what we're trying to say, fellas? Victor, hear me out. We're trying to say that we must judge Miss Christine Kangaroo on her impartiality, but don't judge her on her partiality. So anything that she says that is against that is for the PNM, don't judge she on that. But once she's attacking both sides, I judge she on that, which she's not gonna do. I don't understand how anybody can't see that this woman is miles away from independence, miles away. I don't see how the media could the newspapers and the editorials every single day could find some way to hate on Kamala. You know something, fellas? Do you know that in Trinidad and Tobago, Kamala Prasad has more haters than Keith Rowley? Because Transparency International, the Heliconia Foundation, the Business Chambers, the Liquor Association, not the Law Association, the Liquor Association, the Integrity Commission, the police, the judiciary, all them, all these activists as well, not besides you, Victor, but like the Philip Alexander and certain somebody who wearing blue and so on, they could find nobody else to attack besides Mrs. Prasad. Because what the woman do all here? This man could literally beat me with a stick and they would sit down and say, yes, Rowley, yes, Rowley, yes, Rowley. Another point I wanted to talk about is sports. It's sports, right? We don't have a national football league. Imagine that. In our oil and gas rich nation, we don't have a professional football league. You hear that, Victor? We don't have a professional football league. We have 5 stadiums put on doing nothing, getting grass. We have so many recreational grounds across Trinidad and Tobago. And we don't have a national football league. It's growing grass, vine, and mining manico and iguana. I don't understand, Victor. Please tell me.
Elsico, I think you're wrong on that with the professional football league. We have a professional football league. Because right now, Keith Rowley and the cabinet kicking we all about. So we have a professional football league. But I will try to get Kelvin Ramdarine to come on the program. I'll try my utmost best. And we could get some further development in relation to that. So thank you very much, Elsie Koro. Stay blessed, stay safe.
Thank you very much, Victor, because they had to celebrate for this Dragon Dance deal. This is a big sham. You're not getting anything from this. Thank you very much, guys. Have a good evening.
Blessings.
Yes, so Elsie Koro is critical.
No, I mean, he is... His opinion is as valid as every other citizen's at the end of the day. It is how he sees it. And quite frankly, he may not be far from being 100% correct.
Yeah, because there is nothing to celebrate yet.
There is nothing to celebrate yet. You know, we will wait. And as I said, the position of the opposition is what do we do while we wait? Do we sit back in an armchair in a rocking chair and just do nothing? Or do we, as a government, as a state, take action in terms of what do we do in our energy sector to bring more gas up, to bring more oil up?
I think, MP, this is what the people wants to hear in the country now. The people wants to hear the criticism,
Yeah.
but they also want to hear at the same time
Yes, scholar.
alternatives.
That's correct.
You understand? So without alternatives, then your
Yes.
criticism will just. We have somebody on the line, Archie? Yeah. Welcome, caller.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Mr. Robert,
Yes, sir.
you hear me?
Yes, sir. Clear.
All right, okay. Now, what I want to continue with here is I want to talk about Mr. Paray, okay? Mr. Paray,
Yes, sir.
I personally want to thank you for coming on this show this afternoon because you did a beautiful piece of presentation there. You're teaching this country good educational stuff about the energy sector, renewables, the business side of doing business with the energy, and it was very nice that you come on the show, and I hope you can come back again. So that is my contribution. Okay?
Thank you very much, caller, and we'll have him here again as regular as he can. Don't worry.
Let me touch one thing you said and one thing the caller said. The caller said he spoke about renewables, right?
Yeah.
And you talk about alternatives. So I want to talk about hydrogen very, very quickly. And hydrogen is part of our landscape because just a couple months ago, Kenny's J, which is a local company, signed a $225 million memorandum of understanding and agreement with Hydrogen de France to build a hydrogen facility here in Trinidad and Tobago. What does that mean for us? There's a horizon as well for that in terms of somewhere around 28, 29. But if they can do exactly what they have to do with Venezuela now, find a good contractual arrangement with the state, find a way how they can share profits and so on. And it involves bringing partners from NGC to move heat through pipelines, partnering with BP Solar to bring green electricity into the facility, partnering with WASA to bring seawater through WASA pipeline into the facility to make what you call green hydrogen.
We WASA?
We WASA. Right? Because they move in water, so we had to use WASA. Right? But this facility at the end of the day will produce about 140,000 tons of hydrogen that can feed the entire Point Lisas estate for feedstock. Methanol can be made, which is one of our biggest market produce. Now you're getting about $2,200 a ton US for methanol. You can make green methanol from hydrogen, which carries a higher value, a higher price. Right now, Methanex is using, they have 2 prototype ships that are running with methanol. And you think about this for a second, if we as a government work with these investors in hydrogen, that we can make Trinidad a hub for hydrogen that can do Methanex, methanol. We can turn the Galeota Point facility into a hub for all marine vessels to refuel with methanol. Because by 2040, there is supposed to be a ban on diesel engines in all ships, right? So it means that alternative green energy has to be used in ships, and methanol has found a way. Methanex has found a way through Proman to build these 2 ships using pure methanol to run them. And we have 2 of those ships operating here out of Trinidad. Now, hydrogen is a fuel of the future as well, and hydrogen can reduce our reliance on Venezuelan gas at some point in time. So when you are a government and you're looking at policy, and this is why I'm saying sometimes our system of 5-year governments works against us, because every 5 years, let's say you have a government change, your policy changes. The United States, they write policy in 8, 10, 15, 25 and 50-year blocks. So you have policy direction, no matter what the administration changes, you carry policy. So you have sugar in the 60s, oil in the 70s, gas in the 90s. What is the fuel of the future for us here in Trinidad and Tobago? And I have looked at what Hydrogen de France wants to do. I've spoken to the primaries at Kenish J as well. And, if they can land a suitable arrangement with the government of Trinidad and Tobago to operate here, we can have another base fuel that we can use as feedstock in our Point Lisa system, because that model we don't have another model like that anyway in the Western Hemisphere. It's a good model. And 2, we can do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 hydrogen facilities that we can export hydrogen as well. So, and the technology, science in hydrogen is changing every month or 2 now in terms of how to make it more effective for automobiles. The byproduct of hydrogen in your car is water, right? So there is a future in it. There's a future outside of LNG. So this is something that we ought to be looking at as a country where we have an investment, a local investor looking at a partnership with a hydrogen company. That is something that we must take notice of. And when we go to COP 25, 26, 29, and 30, we must be able to articulate that position that puts us in a place that we are ready for this new science. We are serious with decarbonization. We are serious about carbon sequestration, because these are the things that we have to be doing in Trinidad and Tobago to keep up with the international requirements. Do you know Great Britain has passed a law in their parliament that they will not support any investment?
You have a caller? Yeah. All right, I'll remind you. Don't worry. Go ahead, caller.
Member of Parliament, Mr. Rushton Paray, Mr. Archie, and Mr. Roberts.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Roberts, through you, I would like to say that the economic zone on the Dragon Field and the Lower the Manti, right? If you check it on the map, you will see that the borderline where it's drawn, that the greater volume of gas is on the Venezuelan side and the smaller share is on our side. So when this deal did start with Mr. Manning, before the general election in 2000, they were striking up this deal and they didn't know who to get how much percentage. And then the unrest with Hugo Chavez in Venezuela and the history. Then Maduro came and Hugo Chavez, and they come to understanding. But this whole gas deal, what the US gave the license for is that the percentage, when they sell the royalty to Venezuela, they will pay them in goods and services. The gas, yes, it will come to the hibiscus platform and then come through. But this deal is really for Shell operation to contract everything. And the Prime Minister of this country right now, he is just the tout. He just touted for the license and the whereabouts. He is the guarantor, right? To get the gas to come to market. And the real spin-off, it will never come to the people. Because in Mr. Paray constituency, we had a little disaster. He talked about a big one. We had a little flooding, and the whole 12 miles of road is in the sea, coastal erosion, and they do nothing. And we have seen under our stewardship of our political leader, the Mosquito Creek, how much money they have spent to repair and put a retaining wall and coastal erosion buffers. So they don't really care about anything. This is a midnight robber thieving out through contracts. And to remind you, Mr. Roberts, through you, is that the Sabda Group of companies have one of the license of energy. So I don't want to say much, but Trinidadians feel that the heydays are coming. But what we're getting money from is the BP renewal of the contract in the Angeline field and the new Ruby, that is regas, what they negotiate. So TNTech now is paying more to BP and Shell, which is the same owners, but different name and operating license in Trinidad. Have a nice night.
Thank you, caller.
Yeah. The caller made an important point there, and it was raised in terms of what is the domestic price for gas internally. And that was something that was raised at the energy conference as well. in that the investors who were there, they were saying that the price for our domestic gas of what NGC sells to the operator, it's a bit high. It is a disincentive for further capital investment in the existing or additional capital investment in the existing downstream industries as well. And they would like the country to take a look and see if there can be some adjustment to the internal domestic price for gas. And because of the fact that that capital can now go to renewables, it can go to new and emerging fields rather than stay here in Trinidad and put on a second and a third and a fourth methanol plant that will add 300 or 400 jobs to every plant. And this is not just jobs, but it is well-paying jobs. And when well-paying jobs for young professionals, it allows them to buy a home and raise a family. Yeah. And that's what you want to strengthen your country, to strengthen the backbone of your society. You want well-paying jobs with strong families, strong family units. It keeps the crime down, it keeps the welfare down, and you can use your money to build, hospitals, put systems, recreation grounds, parks. So it's really a big cycle around that. So I mean, the caller is really a bit all over the place, but clearly he has a clear understanding of what he feels is happening, and he's not on the wrong track.
Right. So take it, Archie. Welcome, caller.
Good night, Victor. Good night, Mr. Paray.
Good night, sir.
Archie. Minister, you spoke about something just now that really bites me just now. Apart from the dragon, you have to see about that in God's life when that come about. But you spoke about something about the school and the children and the civic in the student companion.
Yeah.
Up to these days that she passing here right now, I just have to help my grandson with all his projects. Whether they do democracy, communism, or whatever in government, all over the world. But when I look into my grandson's social studies book, I don't see nothing that the teacher giving them. No definition, nothing. So he just have to do all this work, crack up his head, and stress out details. I will talk about the Concord that I got a copy from Archie today. Right? But I don't know really what's going on with this education system. We have a baby as an education minister. You have 9,000 children, and the clown still say they are best there. That come like the, what they write in the papers, input best year in the energy sector. What is wrong with these people then? Leave the damn children and them alone, let them learn the work properly. And stop the relationship with the syllabus for them. All right, gentlemen, thank you.
Thank you, caller.
The caller talk about that, and I'm going to call a name here, Cuttridge. Remember Cuttridge? Cuttridge, who wrote all those thin little Nelson West Indian readers, right? W.J. or W.H. Cuttridge. He was someone in our Ministry of Education. Right. He was someone in our Ministry of Education, a British guy. And if you look at how those books were written long ago, so you read about Odysseus and the Cyclops. So you did language, spelling, Greek mythology, and philosophy in one reading. Today we've changed the book and we have Kala and Boyo run down the dog and the ball run. Right?
Don't talk about Kala and Boyo at all.
So we moved a reading strategy where we encompass reading, spelling, history, social studies, philosophy, Greek mythology, and we dumb that out and look at what we are producing. And we talk about we're not producing students who are extremely analytical. We're bringing them academic. There are 25 subjects. But there's the analytical capacity to think, and that's what you need. Because it's one thing to say that, you have a government that is doing A, B, C, D, and G. But are they accomplishing what they set out to do? Right. Give it an analytical look. Just because Paray says so, you don't have to believe it. Go read up Google, pull the two newspaper, balance what Mr. Paray has said with what's outside there in the public domain, and you come to your own conclusion. And when we start coming to our own conclusion, you'll start holding people accountable. So because Rowley says it, that doesn't make it true. Because Kamla says it, that doesn't make it true. If we can culture a society who can say what an authority or a person of authority is saying and go measure, do your own analysis of it, man. Talked about 4 people and then come to you on assessment, you can say, but see that fella talking stupidness, I done with he. You come to an analysis, and we're not doing that. Not even in the school system. You read some children who are writing Form 5 essays, and you swear to God it's standard 2 and standard 3. You know, there is no depth. I remember I had to write an essay of who am I? And I said, well, my name is Rushton Paray. I am 48 years old. I'm married to Alicia Paray. I have 3 children. My father is a policeman. I get 1 out of 10. So I went to the lecturer and said, well, what it is you want? He said, I don't really care that you're born in Guaya. No, I want to know, because you're born in Guaya, what it has done to you. Because your father is a policeman, what his influence has done to you. Because you live across the road from the beach, what's your view on clean air, on the ocean? And when you could tell me that in writing, I will know who you are.
Right.
And we have to start shaping how we are training our children in a more analytical perspective going forward. The faster we do that, Victor, the faster we'll start getting this country in the right track.
Beautiful. So here you have it. We have gone actually 26 minutes over. It was well worth it. And to be honest, I ain't even feeling like stopping. I have accumulated so much knowledge here tonight that I am being honest with you. I feel like I could go on for our next hour right here, just listening and gathering information. And of course, to the end of it all, I fully agree with the MP. We can no longer just take things for granted because somebody who we have confidence in said it. I am one of the person research everything, and that is where I come up with the name facts, not fiction, because we have been exposed to so much fiction in this country by politicians, by prime ministers, by members of parliament, by the judiciary, by the law association, by the church, by everybody. And I have decided that, look, I no longer take anything for granted. I research everything. And that is why today I was able to pose some questions to my good brother. It's because I sat down today and I went and do some research. And while I was doing some research, I think I get upset with something, and that kind of cut it. But I promise not to get upset with anything to cut that research, because research is the key. Research is the key. There's too many, I often tell my children, there's too many information out there for you to stand up. Long time we would have go by the street corner and listen to the elderly talk. And we believe them. When they say the plane pass and drop a baby, we believe that too. Because we had that trust. And we had believed everything that was said to us. Since after the PNM, I stopped believing anything. I check everything out. Because I have seen this Prime Minister stood up on a number of occasions and lied to this public blatantly and openly. And I always like to go back to when Delcy Rodriguez and the PDVSA team came to discuss COVID, according to him and Stuart Young. And this is what we are accepting now for governance. People, I mean, if my last son tell me, Daddy, I want to be a Prime Minister, put him out. Straight, put him out one time. As he said, Daddy, I want to be a Prime Minister, put him out. You know why? Because of his age, I know he could only referring to be a Prime Minister like Rowley. So I put him out one time. We have to have mentors, persons in these positions, and MP Rushton Paray, I congratulate you, and I am proud to sit down here tonight and listen to you explain to the country and give all of us a better understanding as to all the affairs that we have spoken about tonight. I am very, very, very appreciative of it, and I will be asking you to come on a regular basis.
Absolutely, I'll be happy.
Right, so I will really, really like that.
Let me just leave one thought with you before you go. And
Yes.
it's probably something that when you bring me back here soon, we could talk about this. As at 4 o'clock this evening, I had my research people, we talk about research, scan the Venezuelan media, Telesur, which is their national television, there are a lot of those newspapers across there, to search for any conversation about the United States lifting the sanction on the Dragon arrangement with Trinidad and Tobago. And as of 4 o'clock this evening, there has been no commentary from Caracas on it. There has been no commentary in the local media in Venezuela about it. Now it is just strange that after 3 days of an announcement with that such gravity, you're talking about the lifting of a sanction on something. It is strange that no Venezuelan media is carrying any story on it. Something suspect there. And what is even more amazing, not even our media. Nobody make a call to find out. Nobody ever contacted the embassy in Caracas to find out. So it is not usual for these type of international arrangements not to be carried in the national news in the domestic country. And that is something that I did a media release today calling on the Prime Minister to come square with us and find out what is the Ministry of Oil in Venezuela saying? What is PDVSA saying? Have you reached out? Have they spoken to you on this matter? And we are waiting to hear any correspondence from the Prime Minister. Because by next week, if there is no conversation in Caracas about that, without throwing any hot water on anything, that deal could be stillborn. And I want to leave it there as we go forward.
All right. So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Archie, any announcements for tomorrow in relation to Douglas politics? No Douglas politics tomorrow. All right. So there is no confirmation yet on Douglas politics. We will have that for you later on. We want to thank MP Rushton Paray, who came all the way down from his constituency, his busy schedule, sit here, brought to you all the information that you need to know this afternoon. And of course, we will be back. Thank you for allowing us to intrude your homes through social media. We want to say thank you for all the text messages that you have sent. Thank you for the phone calls. And we do appreciate every comment. Every comment is important to us. Remember, this is facts, not fiction, and we will be taking it, MP will be taking this program to the streets on a Friday going forward.
I'll invite you to Mayaro.
So as soon as they invite us, we will be coming.
Nice.
Right? We will be coming. So we will be moving throughout the length and breadth of this country. What we realize is that we reach a certain amount of people here, but we need to expand the information out there. So we decide that on a Friday, we'll be roving throughout the length and breadth of this country, giving people the opportunity to get facts, not fiction, something that they get from the mainstream media. So thank you, and we are out.
Only making up numbers in my island. Al-Rari, I refuse body. I leave them Muslim, them to deal with he. Big smile on my face and with maybe a hand. It's time to move trash from out of this land. In but I taking my time with he. I personally will prepare his body. Make sure he have a sardonic grin on his face. That's all he does do. That man is a waste. Bury in the back of my cemetery. Turn he upside down. He face I can see. Look for the strongest grave. Dig up to cover he. Not with the hand. Put good fork on he. Gypsy, political grasshopper. I may feel little pity cause he's my brother. But like Tarzan, he's swinging from vine to vine. It's time I help he She is a strong, determined woman like me and deserve a chance to run this country. When she in power, I don't go hungry. And Calypsonian does get big money. She don't deserve no spot in my cemetery. I putting she in the center of the city. Paula, you too damn lazy. You sit on a throne while women die daily. You deserve a nice spot in my cemetery. All you do is just collect big salary. Regis, you disappoint me with your racial tongue. You like you can see. Your barber does trim you with weed waka. All day, all you do is Sushila. Fally boy, you is a boss. I celebrate with you when PNM lost. One day you must come bust a line with me. We go knock a glass, make myself happy. I yadi that what you is to me. A grassroots man, stand up for country. I will stand by your side and watch you at work. Or if you falter, you're going to get fucked. Watson, what is wrong with you? I thought you and Fally would have stick like glue. Boy, shake the man hand and tighten that spade before PNM come back and win that race. Shamfa, want we